Channel 3 Moscow is a production of KTCA-TV for stations of the Minnesota Public Television Network.
Hello, I'm Jan Smaby. We don't have to tell you what the big news was in the Soviet Union this month, but tonight you'll get the chance to see some unusual Soviet coverage of the nuclear accident at Chernobyl, a couple of rare moments that didn't make it to the West. Also tonight you'll see several interesting examples of Western society as described by Soviet media, from Nazis in America to the dangers of heavy metal rock music. So don't go away. We have an exciting show for you tonight on the May edition of Channel 3 Moscow.
Hi, I'm Joe Summers. Well, as everyone knows by now, last month's Soviet nuclear accident at Chernobyl illustrated some major differences between Soviet media and media here in the West. Later tonight, we'll take a look at some of the Soviets' coverage of the accident. But we lead off tonight on a slightly different note. Every month, we receive calls from those of you we might call conservative, commenting on the anti-Western bias evident on Soviet TV. We begin tonight's program with a story that might provide some common ground. The subject is Western rock music, heavy metal to be specific, and its negative impact on Soviet youth. Our reports tonight are translated by Basil Ivanov. The narrator is Laurie Kamen.
It sometimes happens that a reactionary trend in the West is accepted in the Soviet Union by Soviet youth as a progressive trend. An example of this is the latest trend, that is to say, in the late 70s, the phenomenon of heavy metal rock. For every positive thing that happens, there are 20 pieces of trash. If these questions could only be approached from our point of view, from our position, so it could be explained to us what all of this represents.
Передачу в адрес передачи до 16 и старше пишет группа ребят из разных школ города Ногинска, Московской области.
In response to a program broadcast on 16 and older, a number of children from various schools in the Moscow area wrote us letters. They say, "We like heavy metal rock music very much. They keep telling us one thing in school, that this is the negative influence from the West. It will affect you too. But how will it affect you? I can see that they have written the names of the groups in English. They probably don't know the translations, but we know what they are." Well, Железная девушка means Iron Maiden. But if we search carefully in the big 2-volume English-Russian dictionary, we can see that Maiden in the context of Iron Maiden means gallows. That is, the name of this group becomes something a little different. It's not an Iron Maiden, but an Iron Gallows. Let's look at the album cover of one of the discs of this ensemble. Let's listen to it.
I left alone. My mind was blank.
Обратите внимание на реакцию ребят. Когда зазвучала музыка,
Pay attention to the faces of the kids. As soon as they hear the music, they become animated. It would seem that this is a biological reaction. But it is precisely this reaction that the performers of hard rock and heavy metal are counting on. The young rock fan at a concert, unknowingly, is turning into an animal. You will see more of this later. Let's look at another group, Twisted Sister from New York City, that is mentioned in this letter. They are especially popular. The leader of the group is the guitarist-singer Daniel D. Snyder. I'll show you what he looks like. Here's the cover of the American magazine Rock World. That's him on the right. He looks like some kind of a strange being, maybe even resembling a female. In my opinion, it's a totally revolting spectacle. What is your reaction? I can see you don't think much of him. This person is now 30 years old, but he prefers to socialize with kids who are 15 and 16 years old. When asked why he prefers their company, he said that he wants to help them become adults. The next question was how, and D. Snyder of Twisted Sister answered that he helps raise teens using uncensored language. In connection with this, I would like to read a letter which was written in response to today's subject. It reads, "I am a fan of heavy metal. I've listened to all of the records by AC/DC and also those by the group Rat. The conversation that day was about Rat, as well as the group Twisted Sister. I'm not a fanatic. I understand that these groups encourage violence, but I don't listen to the words, I listen to the music.
Выступает ансамбль Killers, убийцы. Это общество знает много способов насилия над молодыми телами и душами.
On stage is the group Killers. This society knows many ways to wield violence over young bodies and souls. Violation of intellectual, spiritual, moral, and physical spheres. This is a violent world, a kind of hell, and the Killers sing their praises of violence. Yes, this is a brutal world. Its own chronicle seems to resemble a dance of death, where one has to always be able to separate the killers from the victims. You can see the kind of situation where fans of hard rock become animals. They are quite aggressive and very dangerous. Having learned the kind of music offered at rock concerts, the metal fans play out the music's message on the streets. They form gangs in frequent areas populated by minorities and foreign workers. As you can see, all of this begins with the music of hard rock and heavy metal, and it ends with the beatings of perfectly innocent people.
Joining us tonight is our panel of Soviet experts. Nick Hayes is a professor of Soviet history and culture at Hamline University and Macalester College. Stephen Feinstein teaches Soviet history at the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, and Gita Hammerberg is the assistant professor of Russian language and literature at Macalester College in St. Paul. Welcome to all of you. Thank you. Nick Hayes, how do the Soviet youth get their hands on hard rock music from the United States?
From the United States, most of the American materials are fairly clandestine. That is, they're played over on cassette recorders, pirated recordings. Some groups are entirely legitimate and can be circulated in the Soviet Union. Otherwise, they hear it on radios, Voice of America, they hear it on the BBC. And more important, though, is there's a general flood of Western rock, really officially opened in the last year. A lot of Italian, French, Spanish rock.
No matter how they get it, you can see they like it.
Yeah.
And the kids do like it, but here it was being described as producing a biological reaction. It turns kids into animals. It's quite aggressive and very dangerous.
It sounds like the officialdom believes that, do they?
I think Jerry Farwell just found a friend in the Soviet Union. I mean, this,
the moral majority
all
is alive, and there it
can't
is.
stand it.
What we've seen in the last 6 months, if anything, is that there's a great emphasis on control in the Soviet Union. And this is sort of a deviation they haven't been able to figure out yet. It's a non-controllable thing, and I think they have some real doubts deep down. Obviously, I don't think most people in the United States would think it's anything too significant, but here they describe it in an animal-like way. What I find interesting is that all left-wing revolutions, whether it be Soviet Union, Communist China, Cambodia, they all move to the right when it comes to this issue of morality, when it comes to rock music or prostitution or card games or you name it. Everything that's associated in that sphere is a bourgeois reactionary type of activity.
So how effective, Nick, would this be to the Soviet people when it's aired on Soviet television? Does it have an impact?
I think the impact is it shows that there's a great deal of discussion and anxiety about rock. Those kids obviously like it. They know it. The guys, the moderator there trying to put it down wasn't having much of an effect. And so the point of the story really is
I think
that
the parents may find it interesting. The kids probably laughed about it on the way out.
It reminds me of all the stories about if you play the records backwards, they spell Satan. It's the same sort of spirit, it seems to me.
Gita, you were going to say something?
Well, I think there's a definite message to the kids here, and that's the sort of desired targeted audience, and it'll probably go by them, and to the parents, and it shows also how much the Soviets always have been concerned about the kids, how much the adults take part in their morality and whatnot. There was another little interesting piece there I thought was the reference to one of the rock musicians as some sort of alien creature, even almost a woman.
That's right. But then I think some of us might share that in the United States too. Who knows? Joe, we're going to go on to the next segment.
One of the most obvious places to find evidence of the Soviet influence on our culture is in the arts, especially ballet. Now, names like Baryshnikov, Nureyev, and Makarova have become commonplace in American ballet. The Soviet emphasis on this art form is evident in every corner of the Soviet Union, as we see in this report.
Этот город часто называют столицей Сибири.
This city is often referred to as the capital of Siberia. Novosibirsk is a city of 1.5 million people, and it continues to grow rapidly. But in any kind of weather, at 7 sharp, the curtains rise in all 6 theaters in the city. In Japan, Canada, in distant Australia, France, Italy, and Brazil, the members of the Novosibirsk Academic Theater have danced in all of these places. How do you become a ballerina? Very simple. First, you have to submit an application. Not to the theater, of course, but to the Novosibirsk School of Choreography. There are hundreds of aspirants, so the competition for the few openings is intense. All the same, the school sends its teachers on long recruiting trips every year. Why are the students drawn to this place? There are similar schools in other Siberian locales. There can be only one answer. The Novosibirsk Ballet School is very highly regarded. Today is the last day of 3 days of auditions. You can have an ideal figure, an excellent walk, great leaping ability, but if you aren't musical, if you don't have a sense of rhythm, an innate artistic ability, then you do not have a future in ballet. For some reason, the fathers seem to be the most worried. Oh no, they're not on the list, and they tried so hard. For our friend Masha from faraway Surut, it looks like Lady Luck has smiled on her today. And now they have to wait for September 1st. They have waited for this day for such a long time, but now it seems there is more than just dancing. Just standing in one place takes a lot of learning. The bar, it really doesn't sound like a ballet word. Everything has to be carefully thought out. Every morning during their 8 years of training, they will come to this rehearsal hall. The School of Choreography is really 3 schools, all under one roof. First of all, there is the dance, the ballet school. Then there is the music school. The student must be able to read music and play at least one musical instrument. And finally, regular school for general education. With mathematics, compositions, Mendeleev's tables, all of this is compulsory for the children. Ballet shoes. It's a shame that they can't put them on. They are only a memento. But they are the real thing, the kind adult performers wear in the theater. How many performances will they witness?
These next performers might not be as accomplished as their ballet counterparts, but their youthful exuberance can be just as delightful to watch. These kids are performing to a poem entitled Children, the Planets, the Earth. While children's programming is often seen on Soviet television, we seldom see commercials, but we do occasionally see trade advertisements like these.
It's great to travel with a dependable companion. The auto hoist will always get you out of trouble. Antarctica. They say that Antarctica is the coldest spot on the planet. The refrigerator for your family is the Crystal 9M. Fruit juices, the whole year round.
Вася, мотокультиватор Крот.
Vasya, the multi-cultivator MK is a dream.
Look at all that individual initiative. Get a cultivator for your own private plot. What is with all of this capitalist materialism? Refrigerators are back.
Well, the refrigerators, Joe, I think are back just to haunt us. Someone in Moscow has got the story that these Minnesotans want to know more about Soviet
They've heard
refrigerators.
we're listening, and they know the truth.
What about the fruit juice all year round?
I think that was significant. The Soviet Union has, for a long time, had a problem of having availability of fruits only when they're in season. There is a national economy in the Soviet Union, but the transportation grid doesn't permit shipment of large amounts of fruit from the south to the north, the most populated zone. So you usually have yourself in a situation where you may get mango juice if it comes from India in cans during winter, but there's an absence of orange, grapefruit, other things like that. So this may be this propaganda, but or wishful thinking, but that they're advertising it. It's interesting.
Nick, in watching this tonight, a stereotype of mine, I have to say, disappeared, namely Siberia. Here is this obviously prestigious School of the Arts in Siberia, and I have to admit, I didn't realize such a thing existed.
Well, they were really playing up Novosibirsk, which is the main cultural and urban center of Siberia. It's a major center of academic development. It's been a major center for economic planning. And it's true, it does have a marvelous ballet and cultural life in it. But it does, you know, for all of the scenes we've seen in the course of the last year, we've seen several other segments about culture in Siberia. We saw, you know, a snowshoe ballet with Eskimos in one of our first programs. And it's part of that whole idea that there are no backward areas, culture is everywhere.
But I just want to tell you, Jan, there's probably your counterpart in Moscow doing the same kind of a show and saying, it's amazing that in Minnesota they have these type of things too.
I suspect that is true.
Keith, is this odd to have this sort of state investment in the arts in Novosibirsk, or is that pretty well common throughout
No,
the
I think
Soviet?
that's very common. In fact, the state is what invests in the art. It's not always the arts that we in the West would like to see, or as much freedom in the arts as we would like to see.
Ballet
but
is pretty structured.
It's very structured. It was interesting too how they still stress classical ballet much more than we do here, I think. And very timely today, as Baryshnikov, of course, is getting his U.S. citizenship or
It's a very
to
highly developed process where kids are earmarked right from day one. Their parents are given incentives. In fact, they're even given stipends to keep them directed in a specific way, whether it's for piano or dance or anything else, and it's uniform direction. It also applies to sports. That's how you get such...
I was going to say, this is not just limited to the arts.
It's uniform across the spectrum.
Kind of nice seeing him play that pay as much attention to musically talented students as we pay to athletes, though.
Yeah.
The big question, that was the artistic freedom, and the Horwitz visit showed the problem of that.
That's true. It's time now to leave Novosibirsk and go to Chicago.
Ah, that's me, and at the beginning of the month, when most of the world's attention was focused on the nuclear accident at Chernobyl, Soviet television devoted much of its broadcast time to coverage of the May Day festivities in Moscow's Red Square. In addition to present-day activities, this next report takes a look back at the origins of May Day in Chicago.
Дорогие товарищи, телевидение Советского Союза.
Dear comrades, the television of the Soviet Union begins its coverage of the celebration of the 1st of May in the capital city of our country, the hero city, Moscow. In a few minutes, we will be in Red Square. All of the stations in the country are watching via the Vostok program, the space system which is in orbit. This program will be broadcast over the channels of Intervision. Attention, attention comrades. You are watching and listening to Moscow. We are now at Red Square.
Здравствуйте, товарищи.
Здравствуйте.
Hello comrades, hello, Red Square. We are happy to welcome you here, my friends. Today you will be participants in the traditional and exciting event, the celebration of the holiday in the most important place in our country.
Истоки 1 мая. На кинокадрах город Чикаго, площадь Haymarket-сквер.
The origins of the 1st of May. You see the city of Chicago and Haymarket Square. To this place, 100 years ago on May 1st, 1886, former striking workers came here so that their voices could be heard. The peaceful demonstration was disrupted by the gunfire of the police. The memory of the Chicago workers was a reflection of the growing discontent of the proletariat, and this united the workers in an international manifestation, which once and for all established the importance of the date, May 1st. Moscow in 1919, the second celebration of May Day in the free Soviet Union. Lenin is in Red Square, the eternal symbol of the tireless worker. The columns of workers in the square heeded the call of the Communist Party of the Bolsheviks. The celebration of hope became a celebration of future victories. These were the thoughts expressed by Lenin that day in all 3 speeches he made for the occasion. Red Square. This footage is from the film archives. From the entire world, the voice of powerful solidarity of the workers in the country where the proletariat first triumphed.
Soviet television often portrays Soviet technology on the forefront of new ideas, leading the way toward uncovering solutions to complex problems, like improving pollution control measures. Ironically, this report, which also describes pollution caused by the use of radioactivity, appeared just 2 days before the nuclear explosion at Chernobyl.
Опасность загрязнения окружающей среды принято оценивать по шкале Карте-Дубинина.
The dangerous pollution of the environment is rated on the Carté-Dubinin scale. Pollution from motor vehicles is rated at 12. City noises are rated at 15. Radioactive waste products are more dangerous, rated at 40. Chemicals used in agriculture rate 63. But the most dangerous is waste produced in machine making. The petroleum waste products rate a high of 72. The waste produced by the galvanizing process, metals which include chrome, nickel, zinc, and copper, rates 135 on the scale. The dangers of waste from the production of machines are shown in this diagram. Ions of heavy metals interfere with the normal workings of cells of the human organism. They cause extremely serious illnesses. For example, heart arterial, mental illness, hereditary illnesses, epilepsy, paralysis, and cancer.
A similar theme was also conveyed in this report about a recent exhibit consisting of cartoons and drawings with a definite message: the need to protect the world's environment.
В Алма-Ате состоялась всесоюзная выставка «Карикатура защищает природу».
In Alma-Ata, an all-union exhibit of cartoons on protection of the environment was held. This exhibit is an unusual one. It's a traveling exhibit. It has already been in Vilnius, Riga, and Odessa. The exhibit contains 100 cartoons of the leading cartoonists of our country. If you defend the environment, you are protecting your homeland. This thought is expressed by Trishin, and it is a very real thought for us today. The world today is faced not only with nuclear, but an ecological catastrophe as well. This is the thought that all of the artists have expressed. The questions the artists raise require an immediate answer. And this is the strength of these pictures, which are both ironic and straightforwardly humorous, as well as being highly outraged. The cartoons are able to present their message in a way that would otherwise be pedantic. Yes, we are ready to protect and be joyful about one flower, because we think it is unique. But we don't pay attention to the beauty when it appears to be endless. The cartoonists want to keep a red book for man himself. Maybe then we will finally reach equilibrium.
Preserving quality and protecting things from deterioration can also be applied to marketing techniques, as this next report illustrates. It looks at a new bureau in Central Asia designed to facilitate the marketing of fruits and vegetables.
In recent years, there have been a number of collective farm markets built. For example, this complex of markets called the Eastern Bazaar, where you can see there are no shortages. It's no secret that the demand for fruits and vegetables is constantly rising. We filmed this scene at the central market of the city. Much has been done here to improve service for the customers. The counters are open up to 20 hours a day. But most importantly is the way the new Center for the Sale of Fruits and Vegetables operates, namely the Bureau of Commercial Services. What is this? A collective farm worker who brings his goods to market has the opportunity to turn over his entire stock to the Bureau, of course at a lower than market price. The average market price is the basis for this system. Everyone is a winner in this system. The collective farm worker, who has saved precious time, the customers, and the government, which receives a predetermined amount of the profits. This new sales system is liked by everyone.
When we first saw this portion of a Soviet military program, we thought it might be done tongue-in-cheek. But after further viewing, we realized it probably wasn't.
Я решил после школы поступить в десантное училище, а если не получится, то после...
Here's a letter that was quite interesting. It's from the Ukraine. I'll read you one phrase. I decided to join the paratroop training after finishing school. But if it doesn't work out, then I'll join the army. Well, this person will be a paratrooper, a real paratrooper. Letters like this one, by the way, are common. We have received questions about height in many letters. That is, people wondering if their height, or lack of it, will affect their chances. In our training schools, we do not have specific requirements concerning height. This is because the young men expand their height, the width of their shoulders in training, and they become strong. The one thing that is reduced is the waistline. In this case, centimeters don't matter, whether you are in the paratroopers or in the paratrooper school.
Gita, I think that was just a wonderful piece. Have you seen anything like that before?
Never, not with military dress on, certainly.
Can you make any sense out of this at all?
It made the military seem like a friendlier place,
It's a very
and
friendly
one where you
army.
don't have to be
All of
tall.
Eastern Europe can testify as to how well the Soviet army dances.
No, I think it follows logically from the earlier piece on the dance academy in Siberia, that if you couldn't get into the dance academy, don't worry, you could dance in the army.
Hey, what I'm interested in is all this business about pollution. Now, here at Soviet TV are obvious, showing big agencies and big groups protesting the output of the metal factories, the radioactivity, the cars, and so forth. How does this sort of internal debate function in the Soviet Union? There's no Sierra Club, is there?
Well, there has been a growing debate in the Soviet Union since the late 60s, coming out of the environmental sciences, the academies, literature. I'm sure Gita could comment on that, condemning the deplorable waste of Siberia, the lumbering mills, Lake Baikal, and so on. And it's been a source of continuing tension. And what we're seeing now is it begins to spill over onto TV.
Do you see that too, Gita?
I think the emphasis wasn't on what's lacking, but what the progress is in these areas. They show these very modern-looking factories in that graph there, and I think they're always saying there's certain things you can criticize, but you've got to stress that there is measures taken to alleviate these lacks or problems.
To answer your question, though, I think there are state-supported ecological, environmental organizations. When it says it's state-supported, it means that it has access to certain facilities to examine, to make readings, to bring out propaganda, to write letters of criticism to the newspapers. But the big point that it doesn't have is it doesn't have the right to bring a class action suit if there is a big problem.
But for instance, the cartoon exhibit. Now, that's a way to express ideas, and it's obviously permitted and encouraged by officialdom.
It shows an attempt to shift cultural values. It shows an attempt to shift them away from the generation of the 30s and 40s, perhaps much like our own generation, the heavy emphasis on development, that we'll conquer this continent, to an sensitivity. Those cartoons are directed towards younger people, to having a certain ecological consciousness. Now, Steve's right, it's not going to lead to a class action suit, but it definitely is the use of the media to facilitate
Just let me make one point. When you talk about the ecological problem in the Soviet Union, there was a division in the way Soviet industry works. One half of it, or 60% or so, is under the normal 5-year plan, Gosplan and so forth, under civilian control. But there is that unknown sector that's under defense control. And the defense control industry is not open for inspection. And the result has been, just like in the recent nuclear disaster, the Swedes came up with PCBs from the Niemen River, found in the Baltic in 1974. The civilian sector didn't know anything about it, and it took a long process to find out that it came from a defense plant near Riga.
Gita, you were going to jump in there.
Forget what I was going to say. Oh, the comment on literature, that this is a topic that's allowed in literature, which is regulated as well. And there's a whole, this so-called village prose direction explores ecological effects of, say, flooding the rivers, covering whole villages. And this is a very common theme in contemporary Soviet literature.
One quick point. The most moving ecological film I've ever seen is a Soviet film, Konchalovsky's Siberiada.
That's right, yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to the next segment. Joe?
A bit later in tonight's show, we'll be offering you the chance to browse through a special English language edition of Pravda, which includes the Soviets' first significant coverage of the Chernobyl nuclear accident. All you need to do is to record the final few minutes of this program on any VCR that has freeze-frame advance. We'll tell you more about that later. In our next segment, from April 30th, we see how the Soviets managed to kill two birds with one stone as they combined their historic hatred of the Nazis and their perpetual distrust of Americans.
In the Black Ghetto in the town of Greensboro, North Carolina, a meeting is taking place. There are blacks and whites here protesting the actions of the Ku Klux Klan. But at this time, a group from the local Klan has already been dispatched. A cameraman from a local station will in minutes be shooting scenes of a most frightening occurrence. The cameraman never stopped filming. He filmed the people that were shot and the people who were doing the shooting. The police had evaporated. It seems that the authorities knew about this beforehand. 16 men and women, 16 blacks and whites were down by the lead of the Klan. 5 of them died immediately. Thus, television reported this confrontation set up by the Klan and allowed millions to be witnesses. The murderers were on film. There was no need to search for them. They appeared in court twice, and both times they were acquitted.
It shows the communists that there's still plenty of people in the United
Эти события показали коммунистам, говорит один из убийц.
These events showed the communists, said Jerry Smith, one of the killers, that there are still people in America that can stand up for themselves. I would like for my children to look at me and know that their father was not sitting idly by and not doing anything.
Вам не жаль тех, кто погиб в Гринсборо?
Are you sorry for those people that died in Greensboro? This question was asked of the other killer. I feel the same for them as when a dog dies. This Klan member does not consider blacks to be people, or whites either if they support equal rights for Afro-Americans. The next time, said Smith, I'm sure that many more of our people will be involved. What do you think? Do a majority of the Klan members want to participate in shootings? We are always ready.
Основа пирога белая.
An American housewife is letting her daughter in on some culinary secrets. The foundation of the cake is white. I'll add 2 egg whites, a little water, and I'll bake it for about an hour. After that, we put white frosting on the cake. The red must look like blood. The circle is made out of white frosting, and the swastika is made from melted licorice. And then you put on the red frosting so it will look like a flag.
Секреты нацистской кухни. А муж мастерица готовить сладкое.
The secrets of the Nazi kitchen. The husband of the sweet swastika baker is an expert in weapons. He was an instructor. He taught new recruits in the Marine Corps. He's worked in a warehouse for 13 years, but he hasn't forgotten his sharpshooting skills. It's a highly valued skill by his friends, the Nazis. It will be whites against blacks, definitely with weapons. This is the scenario of the future for this Nazi specialist in carbines.
blow you away.
Неужели гитлеризм, свастика?
Is it possible that Hitlerism, swastikas, crematoriums, ghettos, a road to the barbarism of the Middle Ages can all happen again? Hasn't there been enough suffering already? How many more lessons of history must be learned? How much more of this must people be aware of to see where the teachings of racism lead?
Выступает теоретик американского расизма.
Today, the Nazi Party of the White People of America has branches in 30 American cities and in military posts, too. The racists have patrons in the business world and in politics. Of course, this is an internal matter for America as to how they will deal with their stormtroopers. But they are advertising their way of life all over the world and their ideas of how to protect the rights of man.
Steve, that piece was shown April 30th, less than a month ago on Soviet TV. It's all old stuff. What do you suppose they're up to?
Well, the scene with the birthday cake is from a film called California Reich that was shown on PBS about 7 or 8 years ago. It was about the Nazi movement in California. And I think it tried to show how inconsequential it was. There were a few loonies around, but it wasn't widespread. In fact, the Nazi movement in the United States maybe has offices in 30 cities, but there may be 1 or 2 members in most of those cities. This is part of their general campaign, I think, to show that there are reactionary elements in the United States. They're associated with the general nature of the system. They have this specific racial attitude toward blacks. They didn't mention Jews, but that's certainly part of it. And they're also implicitly enemies of the Soviet Union. And it shows you that America is a very dangerous place. Look, everybody's got a gun.
But Steve,
these are people who could kill you.
Why did they use old footage? Why didn't they do something on the
This
Posse
is what baffles me.
Comitatus?
They could use, there's enough
It's a
local
real story
organizations
here right
around now
now.
that it's a valid story to do in Wisconsin or in Idaho, where there's a trial going on.
I think the film was interesting that they use it because that showed also that it's not only white middle-class males involved, but children and women as well.
Well,
I think that's why they cut to that particular.
Yeah, my response, though, that they use this is just crude management. It's supposed to be reportage, which implies something recent. This is something that's 5 to 8, maybe 10 years old, and it's simply propagandistic.
What about the clips of the interviews on Greensboro? Were we speculating that that may have come from a 60-minute interview?
I recall having seen them on 60 Minutes. I think it was fairly well-known coverage in regard to that incident. This whole coverage of the Nazi movement and the KKK using such absolute footage complements actually a point that was made in Pravda over the last 2 weeks. There's been several editorials on their coverage of the West, and they've criticized Vremya and the TV for why they have such hackneyed coverage, and this was almost complimenting it, why they brought out this 10-year-old piece.
Yeah. Now, if this was put into the context of, let's say, a history of racism in America, that would make sense because it would be chronological and you might end with something today, but it didn't. It didn't seem to anyway.
Again, I have to ask the question, how effective is this with the Soviet people?
I think visually it's very effective. I mean,
I
it's still
found it to
effective
be
to
a
me
very
to see that
damning
kid.
piece.
Anatoly Sharansky's first comment when he came to New York
cake.
was that he hadn't seen any criminals yet and he was looking for the muggers.
Joe,
I
are we
think
going to move on?
it is time to move on
All
to
right.
the use of skunks for home security, as I recall.
Indeed, indeed. In their coverage of international events this month, Soviet television took a slightly sarcastic jab at life in the good old US of A with this next story about what they see as our near obsession with home security.
Every year, 1 out of 4 homes in the U.S. is burglarized. Many Americans are taking measures to avoid being victimized. In part, people spend money on this for their own peace of mind. Also, you feel more successful if you have something to protect. This couple spent more than $3,000 for an alarm system. Their main concern is a sense of security. When I leave the house, I turn the system on. When I return, I am sure that the house is secure. You can also use a skunk, which will douse the intruder, creating an intolerable smell.
И эти их планы терпят полный провал. И лучший тому пример успехи советско-афганского транспортного общества.
This past month, we saw more Afghanistan-related reports. This one describes the cooperative mood between Afghanistan and the Soviet Union as the two nations celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Soviet-Afghan Transport Expedition Society.
В Кабуле состоялись торжества по случаю десятилетия советско-афганского транспортного экспедиторского общества «Авсотер».
In Kabul, there was a celebration of 10 years of the Soviet-Afghanistan Transport and Expeditionary Union, Avsoter. Through the mounds of difficult passages, through the intense heat of the deserts, through the serpentine trails and the uninhabited abysses, the Avsoter drivers lead their trucks through all of these obstacles. Their work requires not only great skill, but a soldier's courage. The fact is that the Afghan roads, which the Dushmen have turned into a front for the undeclared war, is an arena for their bandit-like action. They rob caravans of goods necessary for survival. They burn the trucks and kill the drivers. A total of 60 drivers of the Avsoter Union have fallen prey to the bands of murderers, who in total cooperation with their leaders from the West are doing their best to disorganize the economy of the Republic. However, even these plans are subject to total failure due to the Soviet-Afghanistan Transportation Union, which from year to year has increased the volume of shipped goods and is operating rhythmically and with stability.
7 иностранных транспортных фирм и экспедиторских.
Организации Пентагона по осуществлению пресловутой.
These next two reports have to do with the continuing problems with the U.S. space program. The first focuses on radioactivity caused during a nuclear test. It appeared on Soviet TV 9 days following the Chernobyl accident.
Как сообщает газета «Нью Йорк Таймс»,
As reported by the New York Times, during a nuclear explosion at a testing site in Nevada conducted on the 10th of April and meant to test the effect of radiation on military equipment, serious complications occurred. This was how members of the administration described it. The explosion damaged military equipment and caused radioactive infection. The details of the event have not yet been reported. As an administration spokesman said, several weeks will probably pass before the zone infected by radioactivity will be safe to enter.
прежде чем можно будет проникнуть в зону заражения.
Метеорологический спутник.
At the space station at Cape Canaveral, shortly after launch, the American rocket carrier Delta exploded. It was supposed to have launched a meteorological satellite into orbit. It is reported that 91 seconds after blastoff, the main engine of the first stage of the rocket carrier failed. The rocket went out of its trajectory and out of control. Fragments of the 35-meter rocket fell into the Atlantic Ocean. This is the third major catastrophe which has occurred in the American space program in the last 3 months.
On May 6th, this report appeared on Vremya, which demonstrates the resilience of the Libyan people following the recent U.S. military attack.
Ливийская столица. Недавним пиратским налетом своей авиации на один из густонаселенных кварталов главного города.
This is the Libyan capital. In their recent pirate-like attack on the city, the United States had hoped to dishearten the citizens of Tripoli to cause panic. These evil plans all failed. Life goes on as usual in the country's capital. Businesses, banks, and other enterprises are all working normally. In Tripoli's port, there are quite a few ships flying the flags of many governments. Many Libyans come here today. They come to see for themselves the barbarous actions of the American aggressors. Of course, all of this will soon be restored, but will the pain of the people pass as quickly? It is likely that the pain will remain for a long time. As a result of the bombings, totally innocent people were killed. Others were injured. Many families were left without shelter. In Arabian capitals, the action of the United States administration is considered to be a challenge not only to Libya, but to all Arab nations.
Stephen, it was that last comment that got my attention, that this was an action against all Arab nations by the United States.
Well, there is a concept of the Arab nation that runs from Morocco to Iraq. These people consider themselves all the same, except for the divisions that come through national lines. They tend to react negatively whenever there is an outside intrusion, especially from the West. So this, I think, is just a statement of solidarity with the Arab peoples. What is interesting there also is what's not there. There was no statement about the process that led to this raid, no statement about terrorism, the impact of terrorism, the fact that innocent civilians were killed in terrorist activities in Europe, and the broad implications of this for the European economy, for the American economy, and everything else. So it's a very complex subject that was reduced to the essential propaganda line.
What about, Nick, the comment they made about our space program? They were really going after us this month, and they characterized that last failure we had as the third major catastrophe our space program has faced.
Well, it's unfortunate because they covered our space problems beginning with a great deal of sympathy for the Challenger disaster. And at the same time, they paralleled that very nicely with their continuing successes. But in the last few months, frankly, relations with the United States have not gone well, and the general image has gone down, and so we're getting reports of continuing disasters of American space. And of course, that complements always the message that America is tying these things to space weapons and the militarization of space, so if they can't even get these rockets off the ground, how safe will our future be?
Well, the big question that's coming up with the Chernobyl disaster, as well as with these continued disasters in space, is the whole question of technology. And I think what's scary from both the American and from the Soviet point of view is that here you have a large technological infrastructure in both countries, and there are breakdowns occurring. So this raises serious questions about the whole nature of defense, offensive weaponry, computers, technology, whatever the case is.
One of the things that also struck me was the story they gave about the radioactive accident we had 9 days, that was reported 9 days after their Chernobyl tragedy.
Like a preemptive strike.
It seemed to be very preemptive.
Well, it was preemptive, obviously, to diffuse the negative publicity, but it also anticipates Gorbachev's final speech on the subject, in which he goes back to the test moratorium again.
On May Day, which was after the disaster occurred, the Haymarket riot of 100 years ago was the lead story on Radio Moscow.
Gita, I have to ask you about the piece at the very top of the segment, which had to do with our obsession, supposedly, with security. It was interesting. They said, we want to be safe, but they gave us another motivation for investing in all the security, and it was because you feel more successful if you have something to protect. A very pointed comment about us.
It's stressing the materialism that's always implied when they talk about bourgeois Western society. And well,
They
to some
don't-
extent, they're right. I
And to
think.
some extent, they're right,
That's
but they
what
don't
is
miss a
distinct from
chance, do they?
dialectical
Let's not
material.
forget that there is theft in the Soviet Union, the biggest being auto theft rings, which are stealing cars from Moscow and selling them in Georgia and Central Asia.
But Steve, I don't think there's any comparative status of having the more expensive security system in the Soviet Union.
No.
Well, on that note, we are going to move on. Joe?
Finally, tonight, we turn our attention to Chernobyl. While the explosion occurred on April 26th, it wasn't until several days later, on May 5th, that the first extensive report appeared on Vremya. You've probably already seen much of Soviet TV's coverage of the accident on our own major networks, but there were a few clips we saw this month that we found both interesting and unusual.
Вы видите район Чернобыльской атомной станции.
You can see the area of the Chernobyl nuclear station. This film is being shot from a helicopter. This is the actual building at the station. As you can see, the enormous damage that the informational sources of the West talk endlessly about does not exist. The block is the only damaged part. All of the production buildings, the neighboring buildings, the electric towers are all undamaged. Specialized divisions equipped with the latest and specialized technology are proceeding with cleanup work of contaminated areas near the station. This is the Energetika village and its surrounding area. According to the latest facts, the radioactivity at the station and the village has decreased by 1.5 to 2 times.
От Совета министров СССР. В течение 4 мая на Чернобыльской АЭС
On May 6th, more news about Chernobyl appeared on Soviet TV. These next reports stress that minimal damage was caused by the accident, backing it up with coverage we did not see here in the West. Actual interviews with people living near the Chernobyl plant.
Excuse me, I'm from the program Vremya. How was your working day today? It went well. We worked. The voices of the West insist that Kiev is in a panic. I wouldn't say there is any panic. I can't consider it to be a serious question. Panic? What panic? There isn't any. I'm from the program Vremya. How was your first working day after the holiday? Well, I had to work during the holiday to evacuate people from the Pripyat region and Chernobyl. We were evacuating people to the Borodyansky region. What can I say? The transportation was well organized. We had no problems. You work as a bus driver, don't you? Yes, I do. I am the leader of a column. Everything was well organized. I must say that the bus drivers showed great patriotism as far as dealing with the population. As far as what went on at the site, there was no panic. Everything was well organized.
On May 6th, Soviet television presented coverage of the first official news conference about the Chernobyl accident. The conference began with prepared statements from government officials.
As a result of the accident at the station, 2 people died. More than 100 people were affected by radiation. On the night of April 27th, all of these people were taken to Moscow where they received medical attention. Some of them are currently in critical condition. I do not wish to play down the significance of the events at the Chernobyl station. We wish to speak out against any political speculation and reaffirm the peaceful initiatives of the Soviet Union internationally.
Unfortunately, the TV coverage ended before journalists had a chance to ask any questions. Finally, on May 14th, 18 days following the initial accident, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev addressed the Soviet people.
I cannot ignore or not judge politically how the events at Chernobyl were accepted by governments, political activists, the mass communication of the world, several NATO countries, and especially the U.S. They created an abusive anti-Soviet campaign. What wasn't written about and talked about during these days? About thousands of casualties, about communal graves, about a dead Kiev, about the entire Ukraine being poisoned, and so on and so forth. In other words, we came up against a huge batch of lies, the most unconscionable and evil kind of lies. And although it's unpleasant to remind you about all of this, it is needed. Societies of all countries must know exactly what we came up against.
Nick, is Gorbachev right about Western coverage of the Chernobyl disaster?
I think he has a very understandable grievance. As to whether he's right, I can't say. But the speech is really a masterpiece of his presentation of the issue and what happened. And in part, the responsibility here obviously lies that the Soviet Union was slow in getting the information out. But his point is, and it's the same point Vitaly Churkin made before Congress here in the United States, is why this penchant for disaster from the West? Why these immediate, our first reports were 2,000 dead, Holocaust, so on and so forth. Why couldn't they have at least been more restrained to have a more accurate description of what happened?
I think Gorbachev was expecting too much of the American press.
Well, it may show how little he understands of the press. But he's really expressing there, I think, the wounded pride of a nation that's faced a major disaster. And one other thing, Joe, that he alludes to in the speech, but has bothered me greatly in the press, that no one gave the Soviet Union in the course of this eventual credit for a heroic effort to deal with an unprecedented disaster, relocating 90,000 people. Could we relocate 90,000 people that quickly? Encasing it in concrete. I mean, all we did was harp about the failures and generalize about Soviet secrecy and obsessions.
Not to mention the heroism of the people who put out the fire and the frogmen who had to go in and turn off the valves underwater, contaminated water. I mean, this is really the stuff that movies are made of, I suppose.
Yeah. Compared to our coverage of Dr. Galen, I think that's been disproportionate, to be sure. I mean,
yeah, I think the basic problem, though, is the nature of reportage in the Soviet Union versus here. In the Soviet Union, what you're looking at in Vremya or in Pravda is a corporate report. It's the good news that comes first, and it's laid out several days in advance for the most part. In the United States, you have hysteria. In the press conference in Moscow, I think the biggest mistake they made was to really describe the New York Post as a newspaper, because it really is something a little bit less than that.
I'd like to get to that, too. Why is the Russian government so concerned, the Soviet government, in reporting to its own people as to what the Western news media say? Are the media so widespread in the Soviet
Obviously,
Union?
Joe, they are very sensitive to the Western media. And all along in the reporting on the disaster, it was really a dialogue between this is what's really happening, what's happening is not what you're hearing on the BBC or the rumors on the streets. So that's what they were constantly combating, and it was one of the more spectacular revelations of how widespread Western communications are.
Do the Soviets really have the problem that the population believes the Western media?
Rumors can have an effect beyond any reality, and that was what they were trying to combat. The effect of rumors, the fear of panic spreading to the city of Kiev, the fear of panic going into the concerns of the major cities over food.
And yet we didn't see panic in this particular segment.
Look, who knows how to deal with radiation? You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. You can die 6 months later, but you can't maybe make the cause and effect very
Now, it's my understanding that Voice of America was pumping information in regarding this incident.
Yeah.
How believable is Voice of America to the Soviet people?
Depends who's listening and how they digest it and what the circumstances are. I mean, it's cutting and shaving and looking at what comes on page 3 or 4 of Pravda and where the news story comes on Vremya. For example, the first news about the reactor disaster came 26 minutes into the news broadcast on the 26th.
I might add, the BBC is far more credible. Just for the assumption among Russians that the Americans have a grudge, the BBC, also it's easier to get on your dial. It's always been my experience.
And the day the accident happened was the day when a VOA manager redefected to the Soviet Union, and there was a press conference there, and it really had no impact whatsoever because of the nature of the disaster. But the point is that VOA, Radio Liberty are all viewed as propaganda arms of the United States and suspect.
Do you think that the Soviet Union was fairly treated in American coverage of the Chernobyl incident?
I don't. I mean, I think there was a certain amount of panic, but that was generated by the Soviets. I don't think this is a question of fairness or not. It's a question of sequence. How we got the news, where we got them from. It was more.
How do you generate panic by not telling people anything? Does that justify inventing 10,000
No, I don't mean
victims?
that they generated the panic. The reports we did get, because they were so scanty, were panic generating.
I mean, how do you sift out information from a place where you don't have access? This is the ultimate question that you get here. Plus, you have the legacy that the Soviets, only in February, in Soviet Life magazine, said that this particular plant, and there was an article about this plant in Soviet Life, was perfect, that nothing could go wrong with it.
But the heart of the matter is that the Western press never really carried what the real story was. Gorbachev actually addressed it in his final speech when he said that this shows the real danger of nuclear power. It shows that we need new politics. And the real story there is that given even the technology of a superpower, we now know in our later reports that the technology at that plant was very good, that it's beyond all of our abilities to deal with these kinds of problems. And that's what he was making a plea for at the end, to really see the story in that light.
And the hidden agenda here was the Strategic Defense Initiative.
And I'm afraid on that note, we're going to have to end. But thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
That is it for the May edition of Channel 3 Moscow. As we mentioned earlier tonight, we'll be giving you a chance to browse through a recent special edition of Pravda, translated into English by Associated Publishers of St. Paul. This edition, which was published on May 5th, 9 days after the Chernobyl accident, contains the first detailed account. So, if you have your VCR ready, start recording now and we'll transmit several studies to you at high speeds. After the show, you can simply use your freeze frame advance to slow the images down to read them. Okay, here we go. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. In fact, we hope you've enjoyed watching Soviet television with us over the past year. This is our last edition of Channel 3 Moscow, but don't panic. If you really enjoy Soviet TV, we'll be continuing to monitor it, and when we find something interesting, we'll be bringing it to you from time to time on the regular Friday night show, Almanac. As always, we'd like to hear your comments and suggestions about our program. The number to call is 642-1980. You'll be talking to an answering machine, so don't be shy. That number again is 642-1980. Joe Summers and I will see you Friday nights at 7 p.m. for Almanac. Until then, I'm Jan Smaby. Good night.
Channel 3 Moscow is a production of KTCA-TV for stations of the Minnesota Public Television Network.